Okay, so good evening and welcome to our talk. We're going to be talking about the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, which is the discourse on the foundations of awareness as taught directly by the Buddha himself. So when we do a Dhamma talk, it's customary, it's traditional that we do a short invocation for the teachings of the Buddha, and I will just do it for us. It's quick, and I'll just do it, repeat 3 times. It goes like this. Namo tasso bhagavato arahato sama buddhassa. Namo tasso bhagavato arahato sama buddhassa. Namo tasso bhagavato arahato sama buddhassa. And so that just means that we're honoring the presence of the Blessed One, the Buddha himself. That's all it says. So just to get started, these props, I just want to tell you what these props are about, because I'm sure you're wondering. I have a picture of our teacher, Mr. Goenka, S.N. Goenka, who just died, passed away on Monday, age 90. And you have these Vipassana notices in your books, in your course material. And Mr. Goenka was the world teacher of Vipassana meditation, a lineage that he followed, being Hindu, but being born in what is now Myanmar, Burma. And there was a lineage, and he himself came upon Vipassana by accident. He was suffering from very terrible migraines and had traveled the world. He was a wealthy businessman in Burma, married. In fact, he left 6 sons along with his wife when he passed away on Monday, this past Monday. And by chance, he took a Vipassana course, a 10-day meditation course that we are going to be speaking about through these teachings. And somehow, through this course, his migraine stopped. So he thought maybe there was some healthy effects to this course, and he started studying it, and he developed a certain aptitude for the meditation and for teaching the meditation. And so the lineage passed the teachings to him, and he became the world teacher and expanded it through India and through Europe, and there are Vipassana centers everywhere. So I honor him. I took 6 of these 10-day courses myself, and if you're able to take one course, it's very difficult obviously to cut 10 days out of our lives, but they feed you and they house you, and you meditate all day long for 10 days. And at the end of the evening, Mr. Goenka, by tape, you'll be watching a tape, and he will be explaining what you're going through and teaching you directly through the DVD. He's not there, of course. And after you've completed 3 10-day courses, then you can take the Mahasatipatthana course, which is what we'll be talking about tonight. And it's interesting because he prefers to teach the technique before the theory of the technique. And the Mahasatipatthana, the discourse, is the study, what is called the pariyatti, of the parapatti, which is the practice itself. So in that lineage, it's more important to start practicing and then discuss what it is, although he's instructing, of course, the more whole picture of what it is that we're doing in this type of meditation. So I'm not here to convert anybody, but it is, I have found, of meditation techniques that the Vipassana meditation technique, and Vipassana just means insight, and I'll be using that word. Vipassana means insight. Upasana means deep understanding. Vipassana is even deeper understanding. I have found that it is a very deep technique, and people are coming to meditation more and more, seeking peace and calmness and a certain respite from all the frenetic activities that we're involved in our society. but that is a kind of a superficial level of meditation. In other words, if you have purchased a mantra for $1,500, and we're not putting anybody down here, but if you are doing that mantra, you will enter into an alpha state. The brain waves will start to come into a lower frequency, and you will start to feel a certain calmness. So that is helpful, but and there are other meditation techniques, walking awareness techniques, etc. But they do not go to the root level of where the programs are that are actually causing the kinds of reactions and the kinds of behaviors that bring ourselves, let's say, not peaceful states or agitated states or anxious states. So how is it that we can go to the deepest level and uproot what is causing us certain types of, in the Buddha's words, suffering? And I have found that this type of technique really goes into the root level, especially if you're sitting with yourself for 10 days. Okay, so if you can imagine that, everything is taken care of for you. But there's no writing materials, there's no reading materials, obviously no phones, no computers, and you're just there in a very nice environment to sit with yourself and go to the deepest levels of yourself. And of course, that's where you're going to know yourself as you are at the deepest level, rather than self-hypnotizing or self-medicating yourself with, for instance, a mantra technique. So again, I'm not pushing this technique, but I'm just saying that this has been very helpful, and Mr. Goenka teaches the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, and so I like to share that as well with the public, and we'll be talking to the YouTube audience as well. So to continue, what we have here is called the Tipitakas, which means the three baskets, and this is considered the canon of the Buddhist teachings. Canon is actually, the definition of a canon is a column. A canon is something that holds up a house, okay? And these are the canons, the principles or the precepts that the Buddha taught. And so they're divided into three parts. The biggest part is what is called the Sutta Pitaka, which is the discourses themselves. And then there is what is called the Vinaya, which are the rules of the order. The Vinaya are only these 3 volumes, and these are the 250 rules of the order. If you become a Buddhist nun or a Buddhist monk, you would follow, and the lay people will follow the first 5 precepts, which are considered the first, and we'll go through all of that. Okay, so I'm just giving you a general introduction. And then there is this small volume here, which is called the Abhidhamma, and that is the higher teachings. And there were several types of Abhidhammas after the Buddha's passing away, and these are more or less the condensation of the discourses themselves. They're very dry, and they're kind of lists, the 10 defilements, etc., the 5 hindrances, and they're lists of things that the Buddha talks about in the discourses. So I put this here as a kind of a dramatic show of how much discoursing the Buddha did, because to set this up before we go into the discourse itself, just to go back into a timeline to let you know who Siddhartha Gautama was, who becomes the Buddha, and where he fits in the context of religious history, especially of India at that period where he lived. But in relationship to the volumes of discourses, that happens because he is 35 years old when he attains enlightenment, when he reaches nirvana, but he passes away at age 80. So he's actually preaching for 45 years through northern India, and of course the chief disciples, the elder monks and and nuns are, of course, memorizing, and his assistant of the last 25 years of his life, Ananda, who has a phenomenal memory, also are memorizing these discourses. And on the passing away of the Buddha, the discourses are then codified through the first council, as it's called, and 500 arhats, which are realized monks. It was the monks in this case, codify. 500 monks convene and they codify the discourses and set them down. This is the way we're going to teach them from here on for posterity. So this represents a part of that. This is the Majjhima Nikaya, which is what is called the middle length discourses, and there are 3 volumes in here, I believe. These 3 are what is called the Digha Nikaya, which are the longer groupings. And then there is the connected discourses. This little book was about 1,000+ pages. Fun reading, you know, if you like to spend a year or 2 reading one book. But because each of the discourses could be a page long, or some of them are, in this case, the Mahasatipatthana is a 20-page long discourse. So one can really go into the depths of the teachings of the Buddha. And of course, the sort of liability side of it is to try to condense what we're going to talk about tonight into 2 hours. Okay, so try to take 45 years of time. So we'll attempt it, and it's doable, of course. So just to go a little bit into the timeline, Siddhartha Gautama is born in 563 before the Common Era, as it's called now, BCE, and lives to 483 BCE, which is 80 years of time. Now, where he is in the timeline is there is a Vedic culture that is not known how long this Vedic culture has existed. Now, there has been some scholarly debate that what happened 1,500 years before the Buddha's birth, there is a conjecture that there was what is called an Aryan invasion that comes from northern Europe through Iran into what is now Afghanistan and what is now Pakistan, into the Indus River Valley. And so this is, in fact, Indus River is where the word Hindu comes from, Indus River Valley, and there is already a very established culture there. The caste system is already very established, and there are cities, there's literature, there's I'm sorry, there is not literature, but there's spoken poetry. There is no writing or reading or alphabet at that time. This is again 1,500 years, so we're going back 2,000 before the Common Era. And these Aryans, we're not sure where they come from, but because, as you may remember, English is what is called an Indo-European language. Indo-European language is the language group that we speak. It's not the Romance group or the Slavic group, etc. So there are numerous Sanskrit words in the English language. Nobody knows how they got there. Even the words sutta, which in Sanskrit is sutra, and I'll explain the difference between Sanskrit and Pali, because Pali is the language that all of the canon is written in, and the Buddha spoke Pali, which was sort of an everyman's Sanskrit, an everyday Sanskrit, because only the priests and the nobility spoke a higher Sanskrit, but the commoners spoke Pali. And so, for instance, as I just said, in Sanskrit, the discourse is called a sutra, and in Pali, sutta. And you've heard the word karma, which is the Sanskrit, in Pali, kama. Dharma in Sanskrit, dhamma. So you can see there's a relationship, but it's a little bit different. Nirvana, nibbana. Okay, so when we're discoursing, we will be using the Pali words, but you'll recognize some of them. But just to go back to this idea of the Indo-European language, that where the Sanskrit words are embedded, for instance, the word sutra is where the word sutra comes from. And sutra literally means in Sanskrit stitching, which is what a sutra is. A sutra, right? So there are these relationships, and no one is quite sure. There is debate. Was there an Aryan invasion? Was there not? And there is no artifact, so no one really knows. It's scholarly conjecture. When or if this happened, there seems to have been quite a big shakeup in the Vedic society, as it was called at that time. At that time, if you wanted to contact the gods, and the gods were different than the Hindu gods are today. They were the precursors. There was Pajapati, there was Brahma, there was Soma, Varuna, various Indian gods that are no longer extant today. And Hindus will tell you, well, yes, those are the ancient gods, but we don't worship those gods anymore. At that time, if you wanted to worship the gods, and you're, as people do today, monotheistic God, you're asking for health, you're asking for wealth, you're asking for the various things that you may not have or that you need, and that's, people are supplicating the gods. But in the Vedic culture, you need a priest as the intermediary to contact the gods, and you must create these sacrifices, animal sacrifices, and all the chants and all the incantations and the spells, and these are all spelled out in the ancient Vedic texts, the Rig Veda, the Artura Veda, the Sama Veda that you've heard of. Later come the Upanishads, which are the fourth Veda as they're considered. So what happens is that the common folk also need to supplicate the gods for their needs as well, but they do not have the cattle, etc., to sacrifice and to pay the priests, because some of these sacrifices are very elaborate. There's, for instance, the horse sacrifice, which takes a year to perform. And so these are very expensive. And so the common folk are getting frustrated as to how are we to contact the gods, or to pray to the gods. And they start to determine that they would sacrifice themselves in that sense. And this is where the movement of asceticism starts to happen, and various men and women start to leave the Vedic society, and they become known as wanderers or samanas. And the Buddha himself is known as the Samana Gautama before he gets his other names. Just to understand that this is what is happening up until where the Buddha is born, 563 before the Common Era, as I said, in what is now the Nepalese-Indian border in the northern India, and that's why you see him with Asian features, as you see people from that region of the world with Asian features. But he, without going into his whole biography, which you might know, the legend that he deserts his wife, who's 16 years old, and their 2-year-old son. He's born into a princely or noble caste, and then has these experiences after his father tries to sequester him into the palaces of pleasure. So because of a fortune telling that your son will either be a great universal monarch, meaning one of these ascetics, or he will be a great worldly or earthly monarch. So the father tries to sequester him in these 3 palaces and not let him see the world at all, sort of imprisons him in these pleasure domes. And the Buddha has opportunity to come out, and he sees what he has not seen in these palaces, where there's music and beauty and health, and he sees an ill person on the street, and he asks his charioteer, what is that? And that's illness. And he's he's mortified. He's never seen illness, and then he sees an old person, and he says, "What happened to that person?" Well, that person got old. What is old age? And he has never seen old age. And then he sees a corpse, and what happened to that person? That person died. And what is death? So with these experiences, he determines to leave and to seek what he describes as the deathless state. And he joins the samanas and these wanderers, and he has two teachers who take him to certain levels of meditation abilities, but he still has not found a deathless state. So he does end up at a certain point with 5 of his friends also practicing these severe asceticisms that are described in detail by him in some of these discourses, eating 1 sesame seed a day, standing in the Ganges or cold rivers all night long, or crouching in a dog's position, or living the life of a dog, or pulling out every hair of their beard and every hair of their head, pulling out all their hairs, that is. There are these cow ascetics that live the life of cows, eating grass, and he himself is subsisting on calf dung. So it's a pretty miserable self-torture that they are inflicting upon themselves. And the idea behind this kind of sacrifice and this self-torture is that by purifying themselves through this, Patrick, can you help those people? That by sacrificing themselves, that they are purifying themselves so that they could approach the gods in a state of purity and then attain not only material types of things that they're looking for, but they're trying to now they're understanding the abilities of meditation and being able to attain higher states of consciousness through the meditation. And so this type of asceticism and this type of self-torture is regarded as a purification process, and not only as it is in this time, in this life, but a process of purification from past lives, saying that the reason that we're suffering and the reason that we're having not the life of the kings or the life of the nobility is because we must have done something in our past lives, bad actions, and that is why we're in this process of purification through these self-tortures. And eventually he comes out of that mode of thought. As I said, I don't want to spend too much time on the biography itself, because that's another, that would take us another amount of time to go through all of that. But he does then has his night of enlightenment, and he does now become what is known as the Tathagata. Now the Tathagata is an expression. Tat means that, which is, as I told you, English, the Sanskrit. So tat is the same as that. Tathagata means one who has come from that. And he becomes the Tathagata. Now, if you've been to India, you know that in every village, in every town, there are all kinds of babas and there are all kinds of gurus. Sometimes you even run into an avatar, or a Bhagavan. These are all titles, very respectful titles, but you will never meet a Tathagata. There is no one who will call himself or herself a Tathagata. And there is no one who will call himself or herself a Buddha. Now, Buddha is from the root of Bodhi, which you've heard, the Bodhi tree, which means, in the literal sense, to know. So a Buddha is one who knows. That is the real translation of Buddha. And so we have this expression that comes in that the Buddha himself will say, Yata Bhuta Jana Dasana, which means to see and know things as they are at the deepest level. Okay, so Buddha meaning to know, but not as we're knowing tonight, intellectually to know it or to read it, but to experience it. Yata Buddha means to know it at the deepest level. And this is what, when we get into the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, is exactly the technique of Yata Buddha, meaning to know it. And so he preaches for 45 years, as I said, and teaches meditation technique and speaks to all kinds of people. He is just wandering. He doesn't stay in many place for very long, and he always has an entourage or retinue. Could be of 500 monks and nuns and hangers-on. Could be 1,000, 1,200, 1,500. And he's living in nature, and he's always in the open. Eventually, monasteries are built, and or parks are given to the sangha, that is, to his community. And there are many types of sanghas at that time as well, that he will also be interacting with these other teachers of the time, famous teachers, who are completely different than this radical teacher, the Buddha, this extremist teacher. There has never been a teacher like this. Even externally, all of these samanas, all of these wanderers at that time have long dreadlocks, and they have long fingernails, and some of them are naked ascetics. They're called the Nagatas, which are part of what becomes the Jain sect. And Mahavira, who lives 100 years before him, who is the great saint of the Jain sect. But the Buddha is the first person who has all of the samanas shave their beards and shave their heads. And no other sect does that. Okay, the nuns and the monks. So he's quite radical from the outside to the inside, as we'll talk about as we get further into the discussion of the discourse. And so by way of a short biography, very short biography, this is what I'm going to give you tonight. And then I would like to now start to go through the discourse itself with you. And so you all have the printout that I created for you. And so it would be helpful if we go through this together. We will go as quickly as we can through it because the viewing audience doesn't understand, but we have 17 pages here. So hang in with us, but we will go through it in a cogent and a clear way. Maha means great. Sati means awareness, or what has been called mindfulness. But the actual word sati means to remember. Okay? But it changes through usage to awareness or mindfulness. But it means to remember. Patthana is a setting forth, or a foundation, or an establishing. So this is the setting forth, the foundation of awareness is what it has come to be called. Now, it should be understood that where does this awareness discourse fall in the Buddha's canon? And we will have to divert from time to time so that I can give you some of the context for where this particular discourse falls. So the Buddha, you've heard, speaks about the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is that there is suffering, and he describes suffering. And we will get into that, what his description of suffering is. The second noble truth is what is the origin of suffering. Okay, and so we will be discussing that. The third noble truth is what is the cessation of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is what is the path to the cessation of suffering. Now, within the path, there are 8 steps to the cessation of suffering. The Mahasatipatthana Sutta is the number 7 step in these 8-fold steps to the cessation of suffering. So I'll place this with you as we get deeper into the Four Noble Truths itself. But this is where you should know this falls into the awareness step of the Eightfold Step. Eightfold Steps. And we will be going through the 8 steps as well. To set up a little bit further before we get into the sutta itself, into the discourse itself, I would like to give you what is called the 3 laksanas, which is the 3 characteristics or the 3 marks of existence. It's called the 3 laksanas. And this is a very important way that you can really organize yourself, all right? The first mark of existence is called anicca. Anicca means impermanence, okay? And this is vital to understand what is impermanence. And impermanence, in the first regard, is about the body itself, about the so-called self. Now, he divides the self into 5 parts. Now, please remember, we are talking about the genius of the Buddha. So it is complex, and there are a lot of parts. Just as if you were to speak to Mr. Einstein or Mr. Freud, it is a very complex thought that this person has come up with through his realizations on the level of genius. So there will be interlocking places where we'll have to divert and come back. So please try to stay with me, even though there's really no way to organize all this, and it has never been organized. There's no chronological order to it. There's no order of the teachings themselves. Certain traditions start with the long discourses, certain traditions start in different places. So the self, the so-called self, the Buddha said, is as insubstantial as a bubble on the foam of a wave in the ocean. That's how insubstantial this thing that I call myself is. And what is the self? The self is a compounded entity. And so when we speak about the self, we're speaking about what he calls the skandhas, or the 5 aggregates that comprise this self, which is so insubstantial. So to divert, he says, at the end of his life, the final words of the Buddha, all compounded entities are subject to dissolution. The self is a compounded entity of 5 aggregates. The self is impermanent, subject to dissolution. What are the 5 parts of the self? There is the material form. Okay, and we'll be going through this too. There is the material form, that's the first part, and then there are the 4, what is called the mental components. All right, so you have the material form, and then the second skandha, or the second aggregate, is what is called sensations, or vedana. Okay, and sensations we'll be discussing in depth here. And the third is what is called the perceptions. So what we sense, then we label. Okay, so you hear, you may sense, the hearing sense. Here's some loud sound outside. The perception sense says fire truck. Right? Okay. And then there is consciousness itself. Now that word consciousness has been used in many ways. The Buddha is very specific, being the genius as he is. He's not diffuse in any way. So consciousness is based on the 6th sense basis. You have this ability to hear. So you have ear consciousness, you have olfactory consciousness, you have taste. And the 6th sense in the Buddha's lexicon is the mind, because in the same way that you're conscious of that sound that just happened because there was a sensation on the eardrum, the mind is apprehending thoughts in the same way that the ear is apprehending sounds, noises, voice, music, all the different types of vibrational sensations that hit the ear. And so then you have the 5th skandha, or the 5th aggregate, which is what is called the sankharas. And here the Buddha, being the genius that he was ahead of the geneticists. He already understood DNA. He already understood there were programs. We have predispositions. We have tendencies. We have proclivities. Okay? Programs, algorithms. And these are the reaction states. Okay? We are reacting because of the programs that have been downloaded to us. Now, the Freudians would say it's your mother that downloaded, and the geneticists are also saying that it is, of course, the X chromosome that is the richest and that is the transmission chromosome, whereas the Y chromosome, the male chromosome, they have no idea basically why it exists except to help reproduce. But it's definitely not as rich as in information as the X chromosome. So the Buddha already understood what this, not in a microscopic sense, that we have the tools to see these things today, but he understood there were programs they call the formations that we are all born with, whatever that is, musical, whatever proclivities you have. So that is what is called the self. That is in reference to impermanence, anicca. We're talking about the self, and these 5 aggregates are compounded entities subject to dissolution. So he said, I'm sorry I didn't say the whole phrase of his final words, all compounded entities are subject to dissolution, strive arduously. Strive arduously, yatabhuta, to understand things as they are, at the deepest level, through the personal experience. And so the second, and so then from this compounded entity of the self, when we talk about impermanence, then we have to start talking about phenomena, all phenomena. Okay, whether it's this wood stage, impermanent, compounded entity. Okay, all circumstances, all events, all situations, compounded entities, subject to what is called samudaya vaya, which will be repeated in this sutta. Arising, passing away. Samudaya, arising, vaya, passing away. Samudaya, arising, passing away. And this is what this meditation practice, the Satipatthana, is about, is to remember at the deepest level any thought, any sensation, any perception, any formation, program, the body itself, subject to arising, passing away, arising, passing away, impermanent. And then the second laksana, the second mark of existence, is what is called anatta, which means no self. Understanding there is no, what happens when we break apart or dissolve the compounded self? What is there? No thing. No thing. What happens when you smash up the wood? You get some fiber, carbon, water particles, molecules, and this is what the subatomic physicists are telling us now. They have not been able to find the foundational part of things. Now, remember, atom comes from the Greek word indivisible. But now we found in the 20th century, 21st century, there's nothing that is not divisible. Everything continues to be divisible. And they keep subdividing that, and there is no foundation yet that has been found. And here the Buddha, being the genius prescient as he is, okay, understands there is no intrinsic, foundational, solidified reality. This is very difficult for us to understand. Not to intellectually understand, but yatabhuta, to experience no thing. Or what is called shunyata, which you've heard the Dalai Lama speak about also, but we have a discourse called the Shunyata discourse, which is the void. And even as the astrophysicists are now looking out, they're seeing 95% of the known universe to be dark matter. They have no idea what this stuff is. 5% is solidified. 95%, they're not sure what it is. They think it may be structural, they think it may be potential, it may be anything. So it seems that the Buddha already understood the void as well. That's the second laksana, the second mark of existence, anatta. So one understands that at the deepest level. And then the third mark of existence, dukkha, which means suffering. And so he explains suffering to us. So these are the three marks of existence that we'll be going deeper into in the sutta, in the discourse itself. And there are more precepts and teachings that we could go into on a deeper level, but let's just start with these, okay, which you can tell are pretty deep as they are. And for instance, I mean, anybody can understand impermanence. What's difficult is to act as if you understand it. Right? To act as if you understand it. And these are the instructions for how to do that, the sutta. So let's move into it now for real. I've explained to you what it means, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, and we could start reading here. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Blessed One was staying among the Kurus at the Kamasada Dhamma, a market town of the Kuru people. There, the Enlightened One addressed the monks, thus, bhikkhus, monks, and they replied, Venerable Sir. Then the Blessed One spoke as follows. So, bhikkhus, by the way, comes to mean monks, but as I mentioned to you, we are in the Indo-European language. Bhikkhu literally means a beggar. So, beggar, bhikkhu. You can see there's a close resemblance between those words. Now, the Blessed One spoke as follows. This is the one and only way for purification of beings. Now, when we speak about purification, this is what we talked about, that these ascetics, these samanas, are trying to purify themselves in these torturous ways, to the point where the Buddha is almost dying, up to the point where he has his night of enlightenment, in this aspiration to purify themselves. Okay? And the Buddha is saying, monks, this is the way to purify yourself. Stop doing what you're doing. I stopped doing it. And that's when my night of enlightenment came, when I stopped starving myself. And I accepted a little rice porridge from a goat herd, a girl that came along and offered a little. Then that night, I came to enlightenment. So the Buddha does not preach asceticism at all. He preaches the middle way between luxury and between asceticism. So this is a very important part of it. This is the only way for purification. I'm going to tell you now, the only way, not the way you're doing it. Okay? For the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the cessation of pain and suffering, for the attainment of the right path, for the realization of nibbana. Now, nibbana, as I told you, nirvana, comes from the Sanskrit root word nirva. Nirva means literally not to blow. Now, how does not to blow come with our concept? We've heard that word nirvana for so long. What it means literally is not to blow on the embers of desire. Okay, so one comes to a cooler state, which is not about the heated state of desire. Because as we'll see, what is the origin of suffering is tanya, desire. Tanya means thirst. So there's a heat there already, and you don't want to fan that heat. So it means literally not to blow, although it's come to mean a certain state of enlightenment or a certain state of deliverance. In other words, he says, the fourfold establishing of awareness. And what are the fourfold? There is a case where a bhikkhu, a monk, remains concentrated on the body in and of itself, ardent and aware, with constant and thorough understanding of impermanence. Now, this is a refrain that is throughout this discourse. Constant and thorough understanding of impermanence. One is aware of the body, in the body, with a constant and thorough understanding of awareness. And that is the highest form of awareness, to be aware of the impermanence. Sampajano satima, meaning constant and thorough, continuously aware of it, completely aware of impermanence. Putting aside desire and aversion with reference for the world. So this is his instructions. When you sit down for meditation, the first thing you do, well, he'll talk about breath. You come to breath, of course, but the equal thing that you do, you put aside all desire for the world and everything you don't want. And you know how we are. That's what we're thinking about. What I need today, what I have to get today, what I have to do this afternoon, what I want to do, what I don't want to do, I don't want to do that. So we're in this constant state, what I want to do, what I don't want to do, right? Desire, aversion. So you put aside desire, aversion with reference to the world. He establishes the fourfold awareness and remains concentrated on the body and in the body, on the sensations, that's the second, on the mind states, and on mental phenomena in and of themselves. So when we say we're establishing the fourfold awarenesses, you're establishing awareness of the body, you're establishing awareness of sensations, you're establishing awareness of mind states, you're establishing awareness of the things in the mind. Thoughts, ideas, associations, nostalgia, things that happened in the past, things that happen in the future. These are the things, or the phenomena, or the objects of the mind. These are the four. You establish awareness in those four areas. There is a case where a bhikkhu, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, sits down, folding his legs crossways, holding his body erect. He fixes his attention on the area around the mouth. Always aware, he breathes in, he breathes out. Now, this is very important, meaning, what does he mean by the attention in the area around the mouth? This is the focus of anapana, which is breath, in and out breathing. Okay? So one starts to focus the mind in this very small area, as I mentioned to you in Vipassana meditation, that we'll be practicing 10 days. The first 3 days are simply anapana, meaning breath, in and out breath, but you're focusing on this area here. So from the opening of the nostrils, okay, the outer rings of the nostrils, and you can do this with me now. As you take air into the nostrils, you feel the air is touching the outer rims of the nostril. You breathe the air in, you're feeling a sensation on the sensitive membranes inside of the nostrils. You're also aware the temperature of that air, slightly cool. Now you're breathing air out. You're noticing temperature of the air slightly warmer from the body, heated, 98 degrees hot. Remember, very hot inside this body. So the air that you're taking in, 74 degrees, air coming out, 98 degrees. So you're aware of temperature. Now you're aware coming over the sensitive membranes of the nostril. Now you're aware out breath, touch of the breath, upper lip. Touch of the breath, upper lip. So you wear this very small area, opening of the nostrils, upper lip. And you're just anapana, in and out breathing. You're establishing awareness through the breath. That's why he says, fixes his attention on the area around the mouth. Now, here comes the first part, observation of the body. Section on respiration. How does a monk dwell observing the body in the body? Now again, this is not reading an anatomy book. This is not getting a lecture on physiology. Okay, this is observing the body in the body. You're sitting in meditation. Now you're told to observe the body in the body. Here, monk, having gone into the forest, he fixes his attention, breathing in a deep breath. He understands properly, I am breathing in a deep breath. Breathing out a deep breath, he understands properly, I'm breathing out a deep breath. Breathing out, breathing in a shallow breath. I'm aware I'm breathing out a shallow breath, breathing in a shallow breath, breathing out a shallow breath. In this way, he trains himself sensing the whole body, breathing in, sensing the whole body, breathing out. And so we're talking about sensing the body, breathing in, breathing out, in the same way is given this idea that the monk, just as a skillful turner or a turner's apprentice when making a long turn understands properly, I am making a long turn, while making a short turn understands properly, I am making a short turn. So he's talking about, for instance, a furniture maker who uses a lathe, and while he's working, he understands this is a short turn, this is a long turn. And in this way, breathing in, breathing out, deep breaths or shallow breaths, calming the body is what happens. The whole body is calmed by breathing in and breathing out. Thus he dwells observing the body in body internally, and he dwells observing the body in body externally. He dwells observing the body in body both internally and externally. And so by this is meant in the sutta that one is actually feeling the body part by part, piece by piece, internally, and there's an inference that as I feel all of this, I understand that all bodies are like that. And that's what is meant by observing externally. It's not like you're looking at somebody's body and understanding it. It's an inference that this is the way my body is, therefore all bodies are this way, whether it's a bird's body or the body of an animal, a cow's body, etc. All bodies are subject to arising and passing away, to impermanence. Then we go on, thus he dwells observing the phenomena of arising in the body, thus he dwells observing the phenomena of arising, passing away in the body. And what this brings us to is actually the thought of the Buddha's final words. And the final words of the Buddha are all compounded entities are subject to arising and passing away, strive arduously. So this phrase, samudaya vaya, arising and passing away, is repeated by the Buddha in his final words. And this is the instruction that one becomes aware of arising and passing away, meaning impermanence itself. Now his awareness is established. This is the body. See, and that's in quotes. This, you have this realization. This is the body. Thus, he develops an awareness to such an extent that there is a mere understanding along with a mere awareness. In this way, he dwells detached without clinging towards anything in the world. And that is how a monk dwells observing body in body. So one is observing this without attachment, without clinging to this amazing understanding. This indeed is the body, and the Buddha says here, but there is just a mere understanding of that, a mere vipassana, a mere upasana, or a mere sati, a mere awareness of that. And the way that that is understood is the word mere, meaning that there is no ego attached to this. There's no like, eureka, I got it, I understand this, wow, I'm great because I got this. It's just, I get it, okay, that's what it is. But yet, it's a deep realization. So from here then we go on to section B, which is called the section of the postures, on the postures. And we're reading, again, monks, a monk while he is walking understands properly, I am walking. While he is standing, he understands properly, I am standing. While he is sitting, he understands properly, I am sitting. While he is lying down, he understands properly, I am lying down. In whichever position he disposes his body, he understands it properly. So this is this kind of awareness that is now connected to the body, but the body in an externalized version, meaning while you're in movement, while you're sitting, while you're standing, or while you're lying down. Thus he dwells, observing the body, observing the phenomena of arising and passing away, again, understanding this is the body. And so this is where we're talking about how the meditation that is described here is not simply what you've come to, some people understand as walking meditation, sitting meditation. And the idea is not just simply that you're putting your heel down and then you're putting your sole down and then you're putting the toes of your foot down and you're understanding awareness part by part in that way. The important thing is that you're understanding the impermanence of walking. That you're so aware, not just that you're walking, but everything that I'm doing, whether I'm walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, is in fact impermanent, subject to arising and passing away. Mr. Goenka gives the example, there is a tightrope walker, and she's very focused on that tightrope, but she's not aware of the impermanence of this body. This is what the meditation is about. Not being aware, so that is part, oh yes, I feel I'm sitting, I feel I'm walking, I'm driving, I'm eating. And he goes into this now even deeper, where he'll say, again, monks, this is a thorough understanding of impermanence, section C, while going forward or backwards. He does so with constant and thorough understanding of impermanence. Whether he's looking straight ahead or he's looking sideways, he does that with constant, thorough understanding of impermanence. While he's bending or stretching, the refrain, he does that with constant, thorough understanding of whether wearing his robes or carrying his bowl. Whether he is eating, drinking, chewing, savoring, urinating, defecating. Whether he is walking, standing, sitting, sleeping, or waking, speaking, or in silence, he does so with constant, thorough understanding of impermanence. So the Buddha is teaching impermanence of the body. Okay? No matter where you are, no matter what this body is doing, remember the impermanence part of it. And then the refrain comes again at the bottom of page 2. I won't keep reading these refrains. Section D, section on the reflections of repulsiveness. Now, because Buddha is teaching impermanence of the body, he's starting with the most difficult way that you're going to learn it, which is through the meditation process, body in body. That's how he wants you to learn it, through direct experience. But of course, not all of us can maintain that kind of concentration or can devote that kind. So he says, okay, monks, if you don't understand impermanence, let's do it this way. As you're sitting there and you're scanning yourself, and we do this in Vipassana meditation, you're scanning yourself from the soles of your feet, part by part, piece by piece, up through the crown of the head. From the crown of the head, part by part, piece by piece, down your arms, down your front trunk, down your back trunk, down your legs, down to the toes, and then you continue back up. You're continuously scanning yourself. Now, what is it that you're considering? In this body of mine, there are hairs of the head, hairs of the skin, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, marrow, kidney, heart, pus, mucus, spleen, lungs, intestines, stomachs with its contents, feces, bile, phlegm, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, nasal mucus, synovial fluids, and urine. He's quite good, this guy. He's laying it out. You want to know what's in this body? Well, let's be truthful. That's what this body is. Okay, as much as you love, and Mr. Goenka gives a great example. He says, you love your wife's hair. You think she has the most beautiful hair of anybody you love touching it, you love looking at it, kissing it. You love your wife's hair so much. But if one of those hairs falls in the soup, it's disgusting. Right? So he's saying, let's reflect on repulsiveness of the body. As much as we're involved here in Hollywood, of making this body beautiful, working out, etc., etc. So he's saying, go into this and know the body from the inside. Know body in body. Not just intellectually. He wants you to know it, to know your mucus as you know it, to know your urine as you know it, and to know it as it is, etc. I'm not trying to be disgusting. This is what he's teaching. And so he says, just as if there was a double-mouth provision bag, that's a bag that has a tie in the middle, and someone were to open that up, he would see various kinds of grains and seeds in there, such as hill patty, mung beans, cow beans, sesame seeds, husked rice. And if a man had discerning eyes, after opening that bag and examining the contents, he would say, this is hill patty, this is patty, these are mung beans, these are cow peas, these are sesame seeds, this is husked rice. In the same way, monks, the monk will reflect on the body that is covered with skin and full of impurities of all kinds, from the soles of the feet upwards, from the hair of the downwards, considering thus, in this body there are all these different parts. So he repeats that, and then he repeats the refrain that knowing this body internally, externally, etc., he dwells observing the phenomena of passing away and arising in this body. He understands this is the body, and he develops an awareness. And it says here in the refrain, I should point out, he develops an awareness to such an extent that there is a mere understanding along with a mere awareness. Now here we are talking about something very grandiose, it appears, awareness, but he's saying, well, once you know this, yata bhuta, knowing it as it is through the direct experience, you've been sitting 10 days and now you feel your blood moving through your body, you feel the heart beating, and most of us have felt our heart beating, but that kind of intense internal, even to the cellular level, he's saying, know the body as it is. You know, feel this body internally. And then he says, thus he develops his awareness to such an extent that there is just a mere understanding. There's a mere awareness. And so what does he mean? It seems pretty amazing if you really have reached that kind of awareness of the internal body. And Mr. Goenke interprets that to say that you have released all identification with the self, going, wow, am I not great? I've accomplished this. I now know this, you know. And he said, no, it's just, you got it. Don't get excited. It's just, you merely understood it. Let's go on. Okay? Very interesting. Of course, it's subject to interpretation. And the word, I heard another monk talking about this idea. The Sanskrit word is mata. He gets just a mata understanding. Mata meaning measured. He gets a measured understanding of it. All right? So one can interpret, but I'm giving you Mr. Goenke's interpretation here. So now we go on to the reflection of the material elements of the body, that's section E, and he reflects on the body, on this very body. We're still in the first awareness state. However it is placed or disposed, considering it according to each characteristic of each element in this body, there is the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. So just as if monks, a skillful cow butcher or his apprentice, after he has slaughtered a cow and divided it into portions, would sit down at the juncture of 4 roads, in the same way a monk reflects on this very body, however it is disposed, considering the material elements in this body, there is earth element, water element, fire element, air element. Now, so how that is interpreted is that anything that is hard in the body is considered earth element. The bones, semi-hard would be organs, feces. Anything that is hard in the body is considered earth element. Anything that is liquid, and we know the body is 75% various types of liquids. So the body is 75% water element, we understand that. Fire element, we understand the metabolism of the body. The body is 98 degrees hot. Why is that? I've actually tried to figure that one out, and I looked it up. Why is the body 98 degrees hot inside, which would be very uncomfortable, right? If we were sitting in a room 98 degrees hot, because there's a metabolic process going on. Each cell has a mitochondria. So as the lipids, as the oxygen comes into each tiny little cell, that factory is burning it up, metabolizing it, and heating up each tiny little cell of your liver, of your kidney, of your spleen. Every little cell in your body is a little heat factory creating heat. That is the scientific today explanation of why this body. So he knew what fire element was. He says, and the digestive juices, and if we get a temperature, there is heat element in this body. And now, knowing things as they are, Yata Bhuta, know fire element in the body. Air element, as we take in the oxygen is circulating all around. So to know the body would be to be, what was that movie, Voyager, where they had the little capsule? It was from the 70s. You remember that movie? Where they swallow the capsule and they go through the body and they see all the... Yeah. Well, this is kind of that's what it reminds me of, that you are so deep in the body that you're seeing and knowing every single process of this body. Now you can say, this is the body. I got it. Not only this body, but by inference, externally, that's what he means. By inference, that's what your body is like. That's what that bird's body is like. That's what that lizard's body is like. That process is the same for all bodies. So you're understanding the body internally and externally in that regard. So the refrain happens again. We move on to page 4, section on the 9 charnel ground observations. And again, remember that he is teaching anicca. He is teaching impermanent. So if you still don't get it, arising, passing away, all the elements, fire element, arising, passing away. Water element, urine is going out, water is coming in, arising, passing away. If you still don't understand it on the material level, this is what I'm going to tell you, monks, you need to do. You need to go to the charnel grounds. Now, in India, if you have been to India, we think that people get cremated in India. Well, you have to be wealthy to be cremated in India. Am I right, Niroshan? Because you have to have 10 people there. Right? You have to hire 10 people. You have to have a special type of very hot burning wood, okay? And you have to get that wood very hot. And then when you put your grandma on there, you don't want her to barbecue. You want her incinerated, right? So it's a very expensive process, this cremation process. It really is. And most people can't afford cremation. So, and they don't like to bury for superstitious reasons. So, if you're a poor person, there's a human dumping ground. And there's no place else to put your body. They just throw your body in it's like a landfill, human landfill. And there, of course, the jackals come and the crows come and the maggots come and you're eaten. That's what happens to your body. And Buddha's saying, you don't understand the impermanence of the body. Let's go over to the charnel ground. And let's look at these bodies. So he describes in very poetic and disgusting terms what happens there. He sees that a dead body has been thrown in the charnel ground, reduced to a skeleton with some flesh. He says, let's start at the beginning. Again, a monk, when he sees a dead body that has been thrown in a charnel ground, being eaten by crows, being eaten by vultures, being eaten by falcons, being eaten by herons, being eaten by dogs, being eaten by tigers, being eaten by leopards, being eaten by jackals, and being eaten by different kinds of creatures, regarding his own body considers thus, indeed, this body is of the same nature, and it will become like that and cannot escape it. And so then he continues to describe, so let's come back. Now you see it's been thrown in the charnel ground, and now it's reduced to a skeleton with some flesh and blood attached to it and held together by some tendons. And he again says, this is the way of the body. My body cannot escape this. And then he goes on, not only will there be a skeleton, but now there won't be any flesh on it, but it'll be smeared with blood and held together, and this is indeed the body. And then he says it'll be just the bones, and then it'll be just bleached bones, and then it'll be just dust. And each time there's the refrain, this is the body. Do you understand impermanence yet? That's what he's teaching. So this is the first awareness. However, you have to come to it. Starting with meditation, awareness, or go out to the charnel grounds and check it out if you don't understand impermanence. So it goes on again through page 5, and we don't have to read all of it. You can read it. And then, because he's really in a poetic way describing it down to when your bones are dust. Now do you understand it? Impermanence? All right, so let's go on to the section which is called the observation of sensations. This is the second of the fourfold awarenesses. And we are now practicing, here monk, while experiencing a pleasant sensation, he understands properly, I am experiencing a pleasant sensation. While he is experiencing an unpleasant sensation, he understands properly, I am experiencing an unpleasant sensation. While he is experiencing a neither unpleasant nor pleasant sensation, he understands properly, I am experiencing a neither unpleasant nor pleasant sensation. Now, remember, of course, we all understand sensation, and every animal, every sentient being, any being that can feel, a bird, a fly, will move towards pleasant sensations and will try to avert unpleasant sensations. So we feel pleasant and unpleasant sensations, of course. And when he says neither pleasant nor unpleasant, he does not mean neutral. The Buddha says people think that I don't feel any way about that, really. I have no feeling about that. We say, oh, there's a fishing boat off the coast of Ecuador right now. I don't feel any way about that. Doesn't make me feel pleasant or unpleasant. The Buddha says that there is no such thing as a neither pleasant nor unpleasant sensation. That all sensations will move towards desire or aversion, towards pleasure or pain, basically, and that one who does not understand that there is no such thing as a neither pleasant nor unpleasant sensation subjects himself or herself to vexation and confusion. So he mentions it, but in other suttas he says there is always going to be pleasure or not pleasure, pleasant or unpleasant sensations. And it's this process of awareness that we're working towards now and into what is sensations. Now, sensations, we should understand, and we will get into this a little bit deeper, but sensations are divided again into the 5 aggregates and the 6 types of sensations that we receive. Okay, so when we are hearing noises, sounds, music, voice, okay, we are getting a sensation on the ear. Now that sensation may be Mozart. Okay, when the perception factor goes, oh, I hear that music. Oh, that's Mozart. I perceived it. At first I was conscious, ear consciousness, you remember? Okay, pleasant or unpleasant. My mom loved Mozart. Me, I really didn't care for Mozart. It was neither pleasant nor unpleasant. I really didn't need Mozart. No, you could turn it off. Okay, so we have to understand sensations are, we have audio sensations, we have olfactory sensations, taste sensations, skin sensations, of course eyesight sensations, pleasant or unpleasant, what you may think. Nero, you may like a red Ferrari. Somebody else may say, red Ferrari? I hate red Ferraris. But that's a visual. You've seen a form, a color, and you perceived it as what it is. And of course, then the 6th sensation, as we said, the mental sensations, pleasant or unpleasant. You may feel this discussion, we're having pleasant intellectual sensations right now. This is so interesting, it's kind of pleasant, or somebody says something racist, let's say. That would be a very unpleasant thought right now. Unpleasant sensation mentally. So we have to understand sensations, at the most particular rigorous level, and that's what these teachings are about. They're extremely rigorous. right? And that's why it takes some time to study it and then not just this is the theory, of course, but then now how are you going to feel sensations to that level? That's what the Buddha is asking you to do. If you want to establish awareness, this is the second part of awareness, sensations. First was body and body, sensations and sensations, and then finally you can say, these are sensations. I understand sensations, what they do at the most minute level. And you only have a mere understanding of it, a mere awareness. I understand sensations. Hey, I just understood sensations, Okay? So, now we move into what is called the third awareness, which is the observation of mind states. Now, mind states means the general attributes of the mind, or the moods of the mind. Now, we've all experienced different moods and states of mind. These are the general attributes of what are the mind. So, you woke up this morning, maybe you were in a very alert state of mind. Maybe you were in a very sluggish state of mind. Sometimes you're in a very concentrated state of mind. Sometimes your mind is drifting. Sometimes you're in a calm state of mind. Sometimes you're agitated state of mind. Okay? So he's describing that you understand you're not trying to control anything. None of this is about control. The word control is never used. You're not trying to suppress anything. You're not trying to still the mind, as you might in Zen practice or etc. You're not trying to do any of that. You're working on awareness is what we're doing here in this practice. So he says, what are the different states of mind? He's giving you a few of them, and in the Abhidhamma, in the higher teachings, there'll be lists of 56 states of mind. The Buddha is only listing a few of them here, but further on, they're listed, as I said, 56 states of mind. So he understands properly a mind state that is free of craving, a mind state that is full of free of aversion. He understands a mind that is full of craving or full of aversion. He understands a mind that is with delusion. And now when he's talking about craving, aversion, and delusion, he's talking about what is called the akusalas or the kaleshas. These are the impurities or the defilements. When he's talking about impurities or purification, the path of purification, he's not talking about necessarily karmic purification from past lifetimes, etc. He's talking about the three, what are called akusalas, or the unwholesome states. And the first one is called lobha, which is greed. And greed is extreme craving, of course. You want something so much, you want so much of it, you crave it so badly, you have to have a lot of it. It's like greed. So that's one of the unwholesome states. And of course, the wholesome state of craving would be of wanting things, would be of giving things, would be of generosity, of what we call dana in Buddhism. And then the second state is aversion or hatred, as it's really called, which is dosa. And so you have extreme hatred, extreme aversion to that. I hate that, you would say. You really mean, I really don't like it, but it's so bad, I really hate that. Okay, so that's hatred. And delusion is the word that is used is doha, but in other places it's used as avidya, which means ignorance. And what is one deluded about, or what is one ignorant about? One is deluded about the three laksanas. One does not understand that there is nothing permanent. One thinks there is permanence. That's a delusion. There is nothing that is permanent. One believes that there is an intrinsic reality, a unit that is foundational. That's delusional. There's nothing that is foundational or intrinsic to itself. Or one believes that there is no suffering. That's delusional. Okay? So these are the delusional states. These are the impurities. These are the impurities he's talking about. Not speculative. How do you know, he says, what you were in your past lifetime? how does your teacher know what he was in his past lifetime? So he will engage in very serious debate and destroy these other teachers of his time. In one of my talks is called the Buddha's Disputation and Refutation of Soul Theory. He destroyed Atman, this idea that there is a Brahman and there is part of the Brahman, which is the Atman, and that there is this yoga, a union between Brahman and Atman. And that was the prevalent understanding of the Vedics at that time. Of all the ascetics believed that they would create, eventually through the asceticism, that they would create a union with Brahma through the Atman. And the Atman is actually what is reborn. Buddha destroys that in 62 different arguments in what is called the Brahmajala Sutta, the great net, the discourse on the great net, meaning those 62 are just contained in a net. They're just like little fish that don't exist. And I can't go into that talk. It's on YouTube as well. So he is debating and he is laying out what is actually impurity. This is what is impurity. Greed, hatred, and delusion. Thinking that there is a personality or a soul or a self, or that anything is permanent, etc. So now he starts understanding mind properly collected, mind that is uncollected, mind that is scattered, mind that is expanded, mind that is unexpanded, mind that is surpassable, mind that is unsurpassable, mind that is concentrated, mind that is unconcentrated. He understands, he dwells understanding mind internally, and he dwells observing mind in mind externally. He understands mind, his own mind by inference. He understands all mind, the nature of mind in general, not just his mind. It's by inference all mind. And he understands it from the mind, experiencing it at the deepest level. Not just hearing about it, as we're doing, pariyati, the study, but the parapati, sitting, experiencing body, experiencing sensations, mind in mind. And now we come to the fourth section, which is the observation of the mental contents, the dhammas as they're called. Now you've heard that expression, dharma, okay? Dharma, as I said, Sanskrit, dhamma, the Pali, it comes from the root. The nouns are created out of root verbs. So da, D-H-A, means to hold. And so Dhamma is something that holds, all right? And Dhamma has about 20 different meanings. It's kind of a probabilistic word. It's a quantum word. So it's been interpreted as law, truth, path, duty, things, states of mind. In this case, he's talking about it as phenomena or things or objects. Dhammas are things. These are the things in my mind. And there's 1,000 things in this mind every single day, as you know, right? All kinds of things passing through this mind, as we've explained. So he talks about now these different types of things and what you should be concentrating on as you're doing this awareness meditation. He starts with what is called the 5 hindrances, and he calls it sense desire. Whenever there is sense desire that I want something, I need to get a cheeseburger, I don't want to sit here anymore, you sense desire in you, you sense that there is no desire in you. So desire, sense desire, that's the first of the hindrances, mental things that we think about, all the sensual things. Remember, sensual relates to the 6 senses. It's not like we think sexual. Sensual relates to anything that you want for your skin, that you desire for your ears to hear, etc. He is aware when there is aversion in him, things we don't want. Okay, you're sitting in meditation, you go, oh, I gotta go tomorrow morning over to see the dentist. Yeah, right? Whatever it is, you're averting. So that's So these are the 5 hindrances. Sloth and torpor is when you're lazy. You don't feel like getting up and meditating or doing your yoga class or etc. Restlessness and worry. Okay, so you're just anxiety, right? And then doubt is the last of the 5 hindrances. And what is it that we are doubting? And this is a very important part of it, because in any religious practice, and I don't care whether you're Christian, Jewish, Hindu, you have to have confidence in your religion or the teaching itself. Doubt is a hindrance. Am I really sitting here? Is this really going to work? Does this guy really, the Buddha, know what he's talking about? You know, that's doubt. Okay, that's one of the 5 hindrances. Mental things going on in the mind, all right? And the Buddha is very specific. As I told you, he's extremely specific about everything he says. What is doubt? Doubt is a lack of confidence or faith, right? And all religion is based on faith. But the Buddha says, no blind faith here. Okay? Confidence, which is the opposite of doubt or faith, is based on what? He says scrutiny and investigation. Okay, that sounds, like Ronald Reagan. Trust but verify, right? Okay, that sounds reasonable. Okay, but what is it, Sir Buddha, Lord, that we are to scrutinize and investigate? Again, being the Buddha, having the algorithms all worked out, you are to investigate the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The teacher, investigate him, scrutinize him. The teachings, Dhamma in this case meaning teachings, and the Sangha, the community around the teacher and the teachings. Okay, Lord, how am I to scrutinize and investigate? Okay, well, I'll tell you how you do that. Remember, it's the Buddha. You go to the Vinaya, you go to the first 5 precepts, the rules of the order. Okay, and you must know these first 5. All right, the first one is abstain from killing, unlike the 10 Commandments. And so when the Buddha says abstain from killing, then of course you are to ask yourself, does the teacher abstain from killing? And of course the law of the land is that one does not kill fellow humans. But the question of, for instance, vegetarianism is brought up by the Buddha. And what does the Buddha say about vegetarianism? Should you kill an animal to eat? And the Buddha says that you should, well, let's put it this way. Remember that the monks are going out every morning and with their begging bowl, and the nuns, to accept any little scrap of food that someone throws to them out of their house. So if something like meat is thrown into your begging bowl, yes, you are to eat that meat that was thrown into your begging bowl. But should you abstain from killing an animal in order to eat it? And the Buddha is very specific about this. He said that you should not eat any animal that you know was specifically killed for you. In other words, don't eat any meat product that you know was specifically killed in your honor for you. And you should not eat any meat that you heard was killed for you. And you should not eat any meat that you suspect was killed for you. So he does abstain from killing, and the teaching is to abstain from killing in that manner specifically, and the Sangha abides by that teaching and the example of the Buddha himself. And so the second precept is abstain from taking what is not given. Now that's a little bit different than abstain from stealing. Abstain from taking what is not given. For instance, if you're walking down the street and there's some oranges hanging over your neighbor's fence, right? That may be in the public property, those oranges, but you're not to take one, even though that may not legally be stealing. You're not to take what is not given. And again, you scrutinize, does the teacher abide by the second precept? Does the teaching teach this? And does the community, the Sangha, observe to not take what is not given? Abstain from sexual misconduct. What does sexual misconduct mean? You see a lot of these gurus getting busted these days, right? So, what does sexual misconduct mean? Being the Buddha, he's got an answer. You have to keep asking, Lord, what is sexual misconduct? Venerable Sir, you're bowing. Lord, what is sexual misconduct? Sexual misconduct is having sex with someone who is under the guardianship of another. Okay? So you would not have sex with children. They're under the guardianship of their parents. You would not have sex with another man's wife. She's under the guardianship of his family and him. You would not have sex with animals. This is a very sophisticated society. You would not have sex with animals. This is in the discourses. They're under the guardianship of their owners, etc. So the fourth, abstain from false speech, divisive speech, harsh speech, or babble. Those are the four types of speeches. Abstain from that. And he has lists. When you go through the long discourse, he has lists of things you should not be babbling about. And as I said, this was a very sophisticated society. So he says, don't talk about shows, don't talk about singers, don't talk about plays, like we talk about movies and we talk about stuff like that. Don't talk about kings, don't talk about the government, don't talk about food, don't talk about all the stuff that we talk about. That's babble. So when he comes to the monks, he'll say, monks, what talk have I interrupted you of right now? They'll ask them. And they'll tell him. And he'll say, if you cannot speak about the Dhamma, maintain noble silence. So when we're doing the Vipassana course, we have 10 days, complete silence. Nothing. Don't even look at people, they tell you. You're on the path, just look down. No communication, noble silence throughout. So I'm just saying, again, the extremity and the radicalness of his teaching, I cannot go into a lot of detail because there is a lot of detail which would probably shock you, some of what he's taught. But in that regard, so does the teacher, does the teaching, does the Sangha abstain from that kind of speech? And the fifth, abstain from intoxicants. Do they abstain from intoxicants, etc.? Because there's a lot of ganja smoking. Believe me, if you go to the Kumbh Mela, there's a lot of all kinds of intoxicants. So let's go now to the section. Those are the 5 hindrances. Then we go to the section on the aggregates of self. Now I've explained to you what are the 5 aggregates of the self. Right, so I won't repeat that. But he is saying that how monks does a monk observing mental contents in mental context as regards the 5 aggregates of clinging. So if you're going like, oh, my body hurts me, I better go get a massage today. So now you have a clinging, your mental thought thing, okay, a mental unit regarding one of the 5 aggregates, okay, or whatever it is. Oh, that car horn that I hear is driving me crazy. I can't meditate anymore. Now you're fixated on that, you see, etc. So just to give you, by the way, I keep mentioning to you how radical his teachings are. So for instance, let's go back to when he's describing the 4 elements of the body itself, correct? Okay, we said there was the earth element, there is the water element, fire element, air element. He says in another one of the suttas, he says, monks, if you are walking down the road and some robbers, we call them in Old English brigands, some robbers attack you, okay? And now one of the robbers takes a cudgel or a wooden stick and he starts beating you over the head with this wooden stick. What you should be aware of at that moment is this. Earth element, wood stick, is hitting earth element, skull. If you do not have this mere understanding, mere awareness of that, you would not have understood the teachings. If you get angry, if you get afraid, if you have any other reaction except this awareness, earth element touching earth element. No pain, no fear, no hatred for that person, no aversion for that person, etc. That's kind of radical. That's more than turning the other cheek, I would say. If the robber drowns you, water element meeting water element. If they throw you into a fire, fire element meeting fire element. If they throw you off a cliff, air element meeting air element. If you do not understand that, you have not understood the teachings. That's pretty radical. I would say that's extreme. You know, I was just hearing the Dalai Lama was speaking about one of the monks who had finally escaped from Tibet after years of being imprisoned by the Chinese and being tortured by the Chinese. And the Dalai Lama said to this particular monk, "Did you ever feel that you were really in extreme danger?" And this particular monk said, "Yes, I did. I felt I was in extreme danger when I started to lose compassion for my guards." That's very extreme. Because he understood the teachings. He felt extreme danger because he was about to lose compassion for the guards. This is the understanding, that the type of awareness that is being preached here. All right, now the section on the sixth sense spheres. So we're understanding now, he properly understands the eye, he properly understands the visible object, he understands the bondage that arises dependent on these two. So you're understanding the bondage that arises. You know, if you love this thing so much, you know, this Ferrari, and you must have it because it's so beautiful to your eye, you know, and now you're clinging to it, now you're attached to it, now you're not understanding impermanence, now you're not understanding now you're not understanding suffering. So this is the section on the sixth sense basis. While you're in meditation, you're understanding that that these are, again, mental objects. Everything that is dependent. Now we're in this fourth area of awareness of mental contents or objects. Now you come to the 7 factors of enlightenment. So if you can come to this mentally as the things in your mind, you will have come to understand the 7 factors of enlightenment. Awareness is the first. Then we have investigation of states, which are the absorptions themselves. You have effort, which is missing in this, in this particular printing that I put out. Effort. Then you have rapture, you have tranquility, you have concentration, and you have equanimity. So these are the 7 factors that you would understand as in the mind, okay? You understand, you'll be observing, and you'll be understanding and have deep insight into what is awareness, what is the deep absorptions, what really is effort. Remember, the last words of the Buddha were, all compounded entities subject to dissolution strive arduously. Effort, effort. Adhitthana, strong determination, it's called. And that's what Mr. Goenka is telling us day after day. Stay, don't leave. You know, I mean, there's no prison guards, there's no gates at the door. You could go get your car and drive away. It's no, strong effort, stay. So make an effort, you won't come back here. 10 days, you know, do what you can now, strong effort. So you're understanding what is strong effort, really, as opposed to, let's say, sloth and torpor, right? The 5 hindrances. You're understanding then when you have bliss, what is bliss? Impermanent, without intrinsic reality, subject to suffering, even bliss. So you're understanding impermanence in all of these factors. You keep understanding it. You do not cling to one of these particular factors of enlightenment. Then we have section on the noble truths. And so I've explained to you that, and we could read a little bit. This is suffering, the first noble truth. What is suffering? Birth is suffering, old age is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, distress are suffering. Association with something that one does not like is suffering. Disassociation from something that one does not like is suffering. Not to get what one desires is suffering. In short, clinging to the five aggregates is suffering. Okay, to the self is suffering. Then he describes sorrow. He describes pain, bodily unpleasantness. What is grief? What is distress? What is the suffering of being associated with what one does not like, what one finds unpleasant, disagreeable, or disliked objects of sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch? So association with things you do not like, that's suffering, right? Or not associating with things you like by sight, ears, Not being with people one loves is suffering. Being with people who one does not love is suffering. So he goes through what is suffering, being subject to old age. He says, oh, truly that we're not subject to old age. Oh, truly that we may be not subject to old age. But this cannot be obtained by mere desire. Not to get what one wants is suffering. So none of us want to grow old. That's what we don't want, right? That's suffering. Not getting what I want, which I would like to live forever, youthful, blah, blah, blah. So we understand he lists suffering, attachment to the five aggregates, to the self itself. And then exposition on the arising or the origin of suffering. What is suffering? It is the craving that occurs again and again, is bound up with pleasure and lust and finds the light now here, now there. That is the craving for sensual pleasures, the craving for repeated rebirth, or the craving for annihilation. So sensual pleasures, we understand, craving for sensual pleasures of the ear, of the eye, of the taste, of the tongue, of the skin. We understand that to be the craving for that. And once you start on that path of craving, you go to clinging. Okay? You get, and this is where we go into what is called Paticca which is called the dependent origination, which are the conditions that are dependent upon conditions. So for instance, when the Buddha goes and is looking for the deathless state, at one point he says, well, what is the condition that precedes death, in fact? And the conclusion he comes to is birth. There cannot be the condition of death without a condition of birth. And what is the condition that birth is dependent on? Birth is dependent on bhavana, becoming, or gestation. Something has to become in order to be born. What is that becoming dependent on? That is dependent on clinging. Something, even the fetus has to cling on to something, in order for it to become and to be born, to gestate. And what is clinging dependent on? Clinging is dependent on desire. One has to want to live. The fetus wants to live. So it desires this thing. Or you could take any sentient or any situation. So this is what dependent origination is about, and this is what he's talking about. So what is then, you could say, desire dependent on? What is the condition desire is dependent on? Desire is dependent upon contact. You have to see something or hear something or taste something that you desire. So that's the antecedent condition. And then what is the contact dependent on? Well, you have to have sense organs, okay, the six sense spheres. You have to have a mechanism to grasp that. You have to have an eye, okay, and then what is that dependent on? That is dependent on nama rupa, which is a body mind. You cannot have sense objects by the sense receptors without a base, a body mind base. And then what is that dependent on? That's dependent on consciousness. before there was a body, there was some kind of consciousness. Even the single cell amoebas or whatever they are, there has to be something, unless you're a creationist and you think God created it and poof, it just all appeared 4,000 years ago. Then what is consciousness dependent on? Consciousness is then dependent on the sankharas, which are the programs, as we said, the downloads, okay, the DNA or whatever the program is. That is the precursor of consciousness. And what are the programs dependent on? And that is ignorance itself. If there was no ignorance, there would not be a chain of causality. Okay, ignorant of anicca, impermanence, ignorance of anatta, ignorance of suffering itself. Now, your question here should be, well, if this is the chain of causation, then what is ignorance dependent on, right? Ignorance, he says, is dependent on the 5 hindrances, which we just covered. Well, what is the 5 hindrances dependent on? Okay, and those are the 10 defilements. And so there is this continuous, he does not let you go for a minute. He will not let you drift. He will be holding on to you every step of the way, so you cannot say, oh, I don't get it, and drift off. There is an answer. Even if he's not living, there is an answer to every one of these questions. And one could figure out some arguments. I find it hard to argue with most of these. Okay, so anyway, we're seeing that this is the origin of suffering is craving or desire, as it said, craving for things that are based on the senses, mental. Remember, you're craving to be with a certain group of intellectual people, to be with Buddhists. Okay, that's a mental thing. You're craving to be with people like that. And this is what is the cause of suffering. Is the craving for all these different types of things which he lists. And now, what is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? Then, of course, is that you give up the craving. You stop desiring those things, or you stop averting those things. Remember, desire and aversion, same coin, different sides. That's all it is. So anything you desire or avert, you're still in attachment. You're still in either craving or aversion. So giving up all that, and then of course he goes through the list again of all those things. It's 2 pages of that that we've already covered. So you just reverse that. That's the converse. And then what is the exposition on the truth of the path of cessation of suffering? And this then is the Eightfold Path. We're on page 15. And the Eightfold Path is actually divided up into 3 sections unequally. So the first 2 are called the wisdom part, the Panya part, which is right view. And what is right view? It is this, monks: the knowledge that there is suffering, the knowledge that there is a cessation of suffering, the knowledge that there is a path. So right view is the knowledge of impermanence, where he says it in other places, of anatta, of no intrinsic reality, of suffering itself. And what, monks, is right intention, sometimes called right thought. Okay, it is the intention of renunciation. You're thinking or intending to renounce, and particularly the renunciation of ill will and violence. If you think about that, that would end a lot of suffering, personal and worldly suffering. If you just took that part and had an intention to stop violence, we would be out of suffering quite a bit. All right, and then he says, then we go into what is called the 5 silas or moralities. And that is what is right speech, which we said already: abstain from lying, abstain from divisive speech or backbiting, they call it, abstain from harsh words, abstain from frivolous talk, they call it here. This is called right speech. Right action: abstain from killing, abstain from taking what has not been given, abstain from sexual misconduct. So he's going through the first 5 of the precepts. That's what would be called right action. Now remember, action is karma. That's the definition of karma, is action. And there are 3 types of action we have to remember. Mental action, and the Buddha says everything starts mentally. Everything in this world, this chair, this camera, this clothing, everything started mentally as an idea. So that is your first action. That is your first karma. Even you're thinking, oh, that guy just cut me off. I could kill that guy. Okay, you're right there. You see, you violated the first precept right there, karmically, by thought. Right? And the second is the verbal action and then physical action. You shouldn't even say, oh, I could kill that guy. Then you shouldn't kill him either. Okay, so you're right. So that is what is right action. You are literally taking it, but on 3 levels, not to kill, abstaining from killing on those 3 levels. And then right livelihood is, now how that is interpreted, right livelihood is based on the 5 precepts again, which he explains in other, here it's a very brief explanation. There are numerous discourses on the four noble truths. There are numerous discourses which are much more detailed than this short that he's giving us here. So when he says right livelihood, he means the same thing. If you have a livelihood that entails killing, that's not right livelihood. If you're a soldier, right, or you're a butcher, anything where you're making your living by killing, that's not right livelihood. Anything where you're making your livelihood from taking what is not given by sexual misconduct. And there are these professions, obviously, in our modern society that do these kinds of things. Abstain from, speech, okay? If you're making your livelihood by not doing right speech or by having harsh speech, etc. Some of these foul comedians, let's say, okay, harsh speech. And then, of course, intoxicants. If you're a bartender or you own a living, or you own a liquor store, right? Personally, I don't even give alcohol as gifts anymore. When you bring over a bottle of wine, I don't even bring over a bottle of wine anymore as a gift. I try to take some of this literally, Anyway, what is then we go on to the last part of the Eightfold, which is right awareness, which we've already talked about. That's the whole sutta, is awareness. So we don't have to review that because we're reviewing right awareness. That's the 7th part of the Eightfold Path, as I told you at the beginning. And then you have what is called right concentration. And here, I'm sorry to tell you, we have to divide that into 8 parts. Hang with me a few more minutes, okay? Right concentration means, samadhi, means the 8 absorptions, or the yanas, as they're called. Yan, which is in English written J-H-A sometimes, comes from the root verb to come close to. So if you want to know something, because everything the Buddha teaches is about knowledge, to know things as they are, yata bhuta janata sana, okay? To be aware of things as they are. So to come close to something has become termed absorption. That's the usage. But yana literally means, so if you want to know what is a flower, you come really close to that flower, right? Or you get a microscope, or you put it under a microscope, or you become a flower. That's the only way you're going to know what a flower really is. Once you become a flower, you will know what a flower is. So you're getting into the 8 absorptions here. Sustained application of the mind, bliss and rapture, concentration is the second one. Then you get into rapture and bliss with pleasure. Then you get into rapture and bliss without pleasure. And then you get, those are called the form concentrations, and you must not cling to any of this. Remember, you start clinging, that entails desire, and that means that you're ignorant of the law of impermanence, and that even bliss, rapture, you've heard of these ecstatic experiences that mystics have, you've got to release that. That's nothing. I have a mere understanding of that. No big deal. I don't have to write a book about it. You release that. So that's the third formed absorption. So the fourth absorption would be bliss. Would be bliss with equanimity, bliss without pleasure, bliss with equanimity. Now you're in rapture, but I'm just here, no big deal. And those are the first four. Now there's four others which are called the formless absorptions, and this is where people get into the cities or into the powers, paranormal powers. The first one is called the base of infinity of space. The base of infinity of space, and of course Einstein taught us space-time is one unit, right? So now there is nothing between you and the moon. There's no time and there's no distance. If you want to go visit the moon, you have the ability to go up there to visit the moon. This is an absorption power that you get out of this being absorbed in that place. And then you have the coming to the base of infinity of consciousness. So you know everything there is to know. For instance, the Buddha said at one point when he was walking in the forest with Ananda, his assistant for the last 25 years of his life, Ananda asks him, Lord, have you really told us everything you know? Remember, he's at the base of the infinity of knowledge. And the Buddha picks up some dirt from the forest, and he says, this is what I've been able to tell you. This forest is what I know. So you have this vast, vast power of knowledge. But you have to drop that. You cannot cling to that. You can't ever cling to anything. Everything detachment, upadi as it's called. Okay? Non-attachment. And then you come to the base of no thing. You understand shunyata in the deepest way, that everything is empty, and you'll hear the Dalai Lama speaking about that, etc. Shunyata, part of the Mahayana, really part of that tradition as well. And then you release that, cannot hold on to that. And then you come to what is called the base of neither perception nor yet non-perception. Base of neither perception nor yet non-perception, meaning that there's still a sliver of me left that's observing, but I'm almost at the place of not observing. This self, this aggregate, the five aggregates, has become so fine, so beyond nothing, that there still is a little bit of perception, but there's almost no perception left. Of course, I've never been there, so I don't know, but that's how it's described, and thus one understands contents in contents, mental contents in contents. So you actually understand these things because you are experiencing these things. And then we come to the last part. I know you're happy. The results of the establishing of awareness. And this is one of my favorite parts because he says, monks, whoever practiced this fourfold establishing of awareness in this manner for 7 years, he may expect one of two results. In this very life, highest wisdom, or if there is still a little bit of aggregates left, the self, a stage of a non-returner. So there are 4 stages that the Buddha says. There is a stage of what is called the Sotapanna, like all of us are stream enterers because we're hearing the Dhamma and we're just getting into the whole Dhamma stream. That's the first level of a practitioner. And then there is what is called an ekagami, which is called a once returner, that one would return to a human body one more time. Then there's the anagami, which is there is a self, but it's no longer requiring a body. So this is where one goes into various realms that the Buddha describes, the realms of the jealous gods, or the realms of the gods, and various levels of the gods, etc. But one still has attachments. May not have an attachment to a body, may not need food, water, may not need clothing or a body anymore, but there's still very subtle attachments. And the last stage is that one would become an arhat, meaning attaining Nibbana, the deathless state, and would never return. And what that means, I don't know either. Okay, but by example, I will give you one short example. At one point in the narratives, the Buddha and the monks learn that one of their fellow monks has died on a mountain they call Vulture's Peak, where he was meditating in a cave. So they decide to go up and to find his body, and they're in this mountainous area and where this cave is, and they cannot find the body. And this was an elder monk. They know he couldn't have gone very far, and yet they cannot find any trace of this monk. And finally the Buddha points up to the sky and he says, "Monks, you see that black wisp of smoke up there?" And he says, "That's Mara. That's death. Death is looking for this monk also, and death cannot find this monk. Gone beyond the deathless state, beyond the realm of death itself." So that's what the stages, non-returner, once returner, or an arhat refers to. But he says, let alone 7 monks, but 7 years monks, but should a person practice this fourfold establishing of awareness, this Mahasatipatthana, in this manner for 6 years, he will attain the highest wisdom, or he will attain the stage of non-returner. Let alone 6 years, let alone 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, let alone 1 year, monk. Should you establish awareness, you will become a non-returner. Or 6 months, or 5 months, or 4 months, or 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, let alone a half a month. No, 7 days. If you could do this for 7 days, if you can maintain this type of awareness, then you will attain the stage of a non-returner, at least. You'll not come back to this body, to a body. And it was for this reason that it was said, this is the one and only way, monks, for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the extinguishing of suffering and grief, for walking on the path of truth, for the realization of nirvana, that is to say, the fourfold establishing of awareness. Thus, the Blessed One spoke, glad in heart, the monks welcomed the words of the Blessed One. End of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So, we're going to end it here. I know it's been a long evening, but I hope you glean some information and you understand the detail and the beauty and the depth and where we can really go as meditators, because this is the most succinct and real instructions that the master, the teacher, gave. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.